Well, I don't know about all of you, but the suspense is killing me, so we're going to get started. This is Susan Snozzy from Resource Development, Operations, and Collaborative Services here at BGCA. And today I have the fantastic pleasure of introducing two of my resource development heroes to speak to you about capital campaigns, Andrea Kihlstedt and Gail Perry. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to them to lead you through 9 questions you must answer before starting a capital campaign. Ladies, take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. And this is Gail Perry. I just want to say hello, a warm and friendly hello to all of my fabulous Boys and Girls Clubs friends across the country. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I've done a lot of work with y'all in various ways in the past few years, and you'll get to meet Andrea Kihlstedt at your national conference in May in New Orleans. Hooray, hooray. So I'll tell you what, Andrea and I really wanted to know where everybody is in the world and in the country. So we were wondering if you would please go to your GoToWebinar control panel, and if you look in the chat, the question box, you can see a place for you to type in a question and just say hello. So how about telling us where you are in the country? Ron's from Washington State, Boys and Girls Club, yeah? Anybody else? Kelly from Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Carson, California. Kim. We have Anna from California, and oh gosh, we're going on and on. I can't quite keep up. Kristen from Central Arizona, Northern California. Jay from Sierra Vista. I probably can't pronounce all these well either, but it's so nice. We've got a lot of people from the West Coast. Just terrific.
Yeah, we've got a Hawaiian, Gail. You've been doing Hawaii, Maui.
Yes, Maui, my friends from Hawaii, Linda. I wondered if you came to my workshop I did last fall for the Hawaii Community Foundation. But anyway, we want to say hello. We love working with Boys and Girls Club. And let me just share a little bit about the context for this webinar. Capital campaigns are a bit of a challenge. They are out of the ordinary. They are only occasional, and they require a very special approach, a very deliberate approach. And Andrea and I used to be capital campaign consultants. We are no longer. And we were concerned when we were consultants that so many organizations went into capital campaigns too quickly, and they were not prepared. So we want to work with you on the early stages of getting your ducks in a row before you start asking for money or raising money. And let me just introduce Andrea Kihlstedt to you. She really wrote the Capital Campaign Bible. When I was a beginning fundraiser maybe 25 years ago, I managed to find her book, and I held on to it for dear life because it was fabulous. And she's just created her what is it, the 4th edition, Andrea?
Yes, ma'am.
4th edition, yeah.
Hard to imagine, but it's true.
Yeah, and she developed a campaign course at the fundraising school, and she's 28 years a campaign consultant, deeply experienced. Andrea?
Thank you, Gail. It always makes me laugh to hear you talk about those things. And I am just pleased to be here with my friend and colleague Gail Perry, who, as you know, is a veteran fundraiser. Gail cut her teeth on capital campaigns at Duke University and UNC Chapel Hill. She was weeping last night when her
target. Oh, broke my heart. Broke my heart.
Yeah. And she has guided, as have I, 25 campaigns or more. Gail really runs one of the most foremost online resources for fundraising with her website and all of her Insiders program. Many of you probably know it. And she too has written a book, Fired Up Fundraising. Gail really lives that out, Fired Up Fundraising, bringing a passion to this business. And I totally appreciate what she does.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you.
Just a minute about what we do at Capital Campaign Masters. We've put together a website called capitalcampaignmasters.com. I assume that all of you who are on this call are interested in capital campaigns. And on that website, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we do weekly blog posts on very practical issues and topics about capital campaign fundraising. We've really built quite a resource bank over the last 3 years there, and it's free and available for you to use. We also do pre-campaign coaching. We do on-site board workshops and online campaign courses, and I am busily working on the first one, which is going to be how to develop your case for support. That's been an interesting interesting exercise. So one of these days it's going to be live, but not yet.
Yeah, and I just want to say that Andrea and I created this website to really bring resources about capital campaigns to the online community because there's not much out there. So please, if you're in a campaign, you can probably go to the website and do a search and find an article or post that really answers a question for you. So I hope you make use of that resource if it would be helpful to you. Oops, am I going the wrong way? No, we're starting right here. All right, well, now we're going to go through, I'm in charge of the slides, so you might hear me fumbling around on my slides today. And also I want to let you know that Andrea and I are both monitoring the question box. So if we have time, we'll respond to your questions, or either we'll wait at the end. But let's talk about what you're supposed to do when you want to approach a capital campaign to raise significantly larger money than you've ever raised before. There are 9 different questions you need to take yourself through and take your leadership through and be very thoughtful about how you want to deal with this and what you want to accomplish. So let me just share. I'm going to take the first couple of questions, then we'll turn it over to Andrea. So one of the fundamental questions for any campaign is, what will you raise money for? What is going to be included in the campaign goal? Now, we call this campaign objectives, and here's an example of what we mean. Usually capital campaigns are for a new building, a capital project, but you can also include additional items in a campaign. You would include the planning monies to get the first drawings done, the architect, the legal, the engineers, all of that, and you could also include the upfit of a new building. That's very typically included in a campaign. And many organizations will also include, now this is an operational cost, okay, the operational cost of the new programming that will happen inside the new building. And, you know, we also highly recommend that you include the cost of the campaign itself in the campaign goal. So, for example, if you have a $5 million campaign and it's going to cost you maybe $500,000 to mount the campaign, your overall campaign goal should be $5.5 million. Very important. And there's I also want to say that what is included in a campaign goal may vary from organization to organization, and some organizations even include an endowment component in terms of their fundraising, and or the annual fund. And what I mean by including the annual fund in your campaign goal is that if you're typically raising $400,000 a year or $900,000, let's say $900,000 a year, you're raising that every year, you would, and your campaign is anticipated to last 4 years, you would count the gifts to your annual fund as part of your campaign goal, and it would increase your campaign goal from $5 million to what, $8.9 million. And Andrea and I argue about this some. Andrea, you want to give us your take on this?
Yeah, we really do. You know, first of all, let me say that many campaigns these days do include some component of endowment. That by and large, we put these two in red because it's important that you pay, that you understand them a little better. You know, it's a capital campaign by and large is not the way to raise a big endowment. But most building campaigns include some aspect of endowment in their campaign goals, a relatively small endowment component. The issue of including your annual fund, the reason Gail and I come from different things is that large university world, and most universities do what's called comprehensive campaigns, which is including everything they raise over a period of 5 or 10 years in their campaign. I've found that by and large for smaller organizations like yours, it's wisest, easiest, most understandable and simplest to keep the annual fund going through the campaign, but not to include it in the campaign goal. And there is more to say about that, which I don't want to hijack this more, but just understand there are many different ways of thinking about it, and the university model generally includes it, and the smaller organization model generally doesn't.
Yeah, and if you do include your annual fund in the campaign goal, you would do a double ask. You would go to your major donors and you would ask for their annual fund pledge over maybe a 4-year period, plus you would ask them for their campaign gift. So they would get credit in the overall campaign for both of those gifts. And just one last comment on this is that one of the reason that so many organizations like to include the annual fund in the campaign is that it makes the campaign total much higher, and it makes the campaign seem a bigger deal. And we also find, we see often that major donors will peg their gift to the size of the campaign goal. For example, if you're running a $5 million campaign, a major donor is probably not going to want to give you more than $500,000 or $1 million max. But if you're having a $10 or $20 million campaign, the major donor, if they have capacity, will make a larger gift. So some organizations see it as a way to really max out a donor's potential if they're really excited about your project and want to play a part.
Well,
don't see any questions about, I'm sorry?
I've always actually thought that it was that they really reason colleges and universities included is because of the hubris of their presidents. But let's not
the hubris of the president. The hubris of the president. Well, you know, I'm a veteran of university fundraising, so I won't go there. Although I've seen it all. Seen it all.
Let's move on.
Yeah, and by the one last thing, usually the word that we use to describe all the different things that are in the list of projects that the campaign will cover, we call them funding objectives. Funding objectives. You know, these are the objectives of our campaign. I don't know if that's as descriptive as needs to be, but it's a terminology that's used often. So let's go to the next question. How do you determine your goal to the campaign? The $64,000 question, right? And I'll say right off the bat that many capital campaign goals are a compromise between the organization's vision and dreams, really big, and the reality of the prospects that you have available and cultivated who want to support your campaign. So lots of times your campaign goal may not equal the project goal, and you may need to find other ways of funding your project. But there are additional goals in a campaign. For example, you could have dollar goals and your list of funding objectives, you know, if you're raising money for a building, for the landscaping, for the upfit, for the planning of the building, you know, all of those might have a certain dollar goal against them that you're measuring your progress. And if you have an endowment goal, you'll be measuring the progress as your campaign goes along in dollar goals. But also there may be some strategic or activity goals. For example, if you have a plan giving component of your campaign, you may set a goal to achieve 50 planned gifts or 20 bequest commitments. And so that's an activity goal in addition to the dollar goal. And Andrea, you have some other things to say in that regard, right?
I do. I always like it when campaigns take on strategic goals. So for example, a strategic goal would be to put together a really fantastic major gifts committee of volunteers who are trained, who are willing to ask, and who are effective. That's a great strategic goal, right? We want, before this campaign is done, we want to have 20 people, 20 volunteers who really become crackerjack fundraisers at the major gifts level. A campaign is ideally set up to have that kind of a goal. And if you do that in your campaign, it's going to pay off long-term for your organization. So that's one kind of strategic goal you might have.
Yeah, and by the way, before I pass on to Andrea for the next question, I'm wondering if y'all would type in your question box, are you in a campaign right now, or are you planning a campaign? It would be fun for us to understand where you are in this whole process. Are you planning or thinking about one, or are you planning? Oh, good. Planning, Ron says he's planning 2 capital campaigns. Way to go, Ron. So good. This is perfect. I've got 5 responses. Topper, Ricky, and Roberto, and Anna are all in the campaign planning. Anybody else? We'd love to know if you're in a campaign now or you're starting to think about it. And it would also be fun to know oh, wow, lots of in a campaign in the thick of it. Oh, Stephen's in the thick of one. And Tara says she's just finished 2. Tara, you could tell us a few things, couldn't you, since you just finished it? And Elaine's in a campaign. Lynn's in one right now for 50,000 new roof. Good for you. Good for you. Terrific, terrific, terrific. Glad to have this data. All right, Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, Gail, you know, one thing before I talk about this gift chart, we believe that an organization should do a campaign probably every 10 or 15 years. So whether you need one or not. So why? Because when you do a campaign, it really drives your fundraising towards major gifts, towards face-to-face solicitation, towards board engagement, towards involving and engaging the leaders in your community in your fundraising. And the knowing that you can do a campaign every 10 or 15 years allows your board and your board members to start thinking bigger about what's ahead for the organization. So we believe that you really should be doing this with some regularity, not every year, not every 3 years, but roughly every 10 years. Now,
good point, Andrea.
Question 3, how many gifts and of what sizes do you need for a capital campaign? I'm sure that all of you have seen this kind of chart, what I refer to as a gift range chart. People call it different things. I call it a gift range chart. And this is a simple gift range chart built for a sort of a regular $5 million campaign. You can see the campaign goal at the bottom. I actually believe there's a mistake in here someplace, but look as I couldn't find it. So who knows, maybe there's not. So what this does, for those of you who don't know it well, who aren't familiar with it, this chart, you know, everybody knows it and very few people understand how powerful it is and how important it is. And it is the fundamental chart you will use as your planning tool for your campaign. Just to run through it here quickly, the column on the left is the number of gifts, then the gift amounts. The third column multiplies the first column times the second at that level, and then we have a cumulative column, and then you'll see we have the number of gifts times what I call a multiplier, and you can see at the highest level the multiplier is three prospects for every gift. At the blue level, the mid-level, it's 4 prospects for every gift, and at the low level, it's 5 prospects for every gift. If you multiply that out, you can see how many prospects do we need to raise how much money, and the results are really quite startling. Gail, you want to give me the next slide here?
Yeah. Go back down here.
You can see on this next slide in this column, which shows the prospects needed, right? If you add up the number of prospects needed, where I've just made that circle, you can see it's 45, 51, 57 prospects. From 57 prospects, you would raise 60% of your money. That's actually, what, 19 gifts, looking at the first column. And I think 57 prospects, roughly 60 prospects, would raise 60% of your money. That's pretty interesting. That's what characterizes capital campaigns as opposed to other kinds of fundraising. They are top-heavy. And the more we know about them, the more we believe that that's what's important and powerful about them. If you look at the blue section, of course, what you'll see is that we have many more gifts, right? 75 plus 50 plus 20 on the left-hand column, requiring many more prospects. But you see how the percentage of the campaign that's raised is only 28% of the campaign raised. So these are top-heavy processes. Now you can create your entire campaign plan around this chart, understanding that how you solicit gifts, how you identify and cultivate donors, how you solicit gifts, how you communicate with donors, how you thank donors, how you recognize donors is going to be different for the people in the orange part of this chart than it is going to be for the people in the green part of this chart. Right? This is going to set up everything you do. Let's have the next slide, Gail.
Okay.
The next slide takes the orange part of this, the top prospect part, and analyzes it. It shows you that 19 gifts with 57 prospects lead to 60% of the goal. Now, people always think that if you miss in the top prospects, top gifts, you can just make it up at the bottom. But that turns out really not to be true. It really is just about never true. And our job in capital campaign fundraising is to keep people focused like a laser on this part of the campaign, to keep driving the energy and the focus. Now, I want to point out something here. Let's look at this top gift of $1 million. We need one gift of $1 million, and we've said that we need 3 prospects in order to find that gift. So imagine that you have 3 prospects who you might consider going to for $1 million. And that you actually go to those 3 prospects and you do it in a great way, and you get up your courage and you ask them for all 3 of them for those gifts. What's likely to happen is that one of them is going to give you $1 million. One of them may give you $250,000. And one of them might give you $500,000 or even less. One of them may say no, though frankly that's unusual in the capital campaign business. The same is true with a $500,000 gift. You're going to ask 3 people for $500,000. Maybe one of them is going to give at that level, and the other 2 are going to give at lower levels. So as you ask at the top of your chart, what you're going to find is that you're creating sort of a waterfall effect. That's the way I think of it. And you're actually filling in the gifts at the lower levels on your chart. So by the time you have asked 57 prospects in this top part of your gift range chart, if everything goes right, you will have gotten 19 gifts in accounting for all of these gifts, but you will also have filled in a lot of the rest of the middle portion of your gift chart. And that's the remarkable thing about a campaign. If you really can keep a laser focus on identifying and cultivating and soliciting the top prospects. Gail, did I cover that clearly?
Yeah, and let me speak a little bit about the gift range chart, also called the donor pyramid. And this is, in fact, your golden tool for analyzing, can you make your goal? Because we recommend that organizations take their list of prospects that they have, hopefully you have rated them, and you sort of know what is a reasonable expectation of a gift, and you lay them out in this chart and see, well, maybe we need $3 million prospects. We only have 2, or we only have 1. Can we make our campaign goal with only $1 million prospect when we've got to have that gift assured? So this, my friends, is a reality check. And I also call it fundraising by the numbers. So there's no smoke and mirrors. There's no guessing. You know, you have done a very detailed analysis of the potential for gifts, and you've matched them up against this chart, and you will know whether you think you can make your goal. And the reason I love the fact that we need 3 prospects for every gift, because this is giving you a hedge. It's a very conservative estimate, because you never know about your prospects. They may travel, they may decide they're not interested in you anymore, they may pass away. Prospects come and they go. But you will know, you will have a map. This is actually a map for how your campaign is going to flow. Now, who's ever had a board member who says, oh, I don't know why we have to have this donor pyramid. We just get $1,000 from 1,000 people, right? Has anybody, how about letting us know, has anybody ever said that, you know, oh, $5,000 from 100 people, or, you know, and does anybody ever had to deal with that? I'm not seeing any responses yet, but I can assure you that Andrea, you've run into that, haven't you?
I sure have. I sure have. Hard to convince people that that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
Lynn says yes. Lynn says yes. But look, here's the thing, and I really want to drive this point home. Capital campaigns are a different structure and methodology and set of strategies. And what we're laying out to you today is the strategies that are involved in making a campaign successful. And if you follow this formula, it is a formula. It is a methodology that is proven over and over and over and over. This will bring you to success. but it is not intuitive. And if or a lot of Boys and Girls Clubs don't have a major gift, a lot of major gift experience, major gift fundraising, and so there's a culture around a little bit of money from a lot of people, and there's not a culture that really understands major gift fundraising. So one of your challenges is to educate your leadership on what capital campaign structure needs to look like, what's the methodology, what will bring success.
So Gail,
any thoughts on that, Andrea?
Yeah, I have a couple of other things. Ron McHenry has asked a really good question here, which is he's surprised that the multiplier grows, the prospect multiplier grows at the lower amount, and it's backwards from the way we think about things in annual giving, and he's exactly right. So why is it that way? Well, it's that way because, you can't ask someone for $1 million, or you shouldn't ask someone for $1 million or 500,000 or $250,000 unless you have done your work getting to know them well, unless you have already built a relationship with them. And many people go into capital campaigns, if they've done their work well, actually just about knowing where those gifts are going to come from. So it's possible to have a smaller multiplier at the top. And then as you ask for those gifts, as I said, they flesh out the chart at the bottom. But because you're spending so much more time and energy and cultivation and work at the top than you are at the bottom, you really should need fewer prospects. This pretty much has proven out over the many years of campaigns that I've done, and it is backwards of what happens when you work less intensely with individual donors. The other thing I wanted to point out here is this. If you look at this pattern of giving in this chart, this is what I would call a reasonably standard pattern. The top gift, as you'll see, is 20% of the goal. Some campaigns, if they have a really broad donor base, will have a campaign gift, the top gift will be 15% of the goal. And they will then require more prospects at the bottom end. So it's not true that one gift range chart is right for every organization. The pattern roughly stays the same, but for broader organizations with broader donor bases, they will require more gifts at the lower end.
Yeah.
End. So I think we can move on, Gail, now to
how
to cultivate the prospects, because as we looked at that orange section, really you realize that the success of your campaign comes from your being able to identify the roughly 60 prospects who can make gifts of $50,000 and more. And you need to think about how you're going to do that in a very clear and strategic way. And it needs to happen long before you're ready to ask people for money. Gail and I have, as we were both consultants for many years, and we saw all too often that people waited until far too far down the road before they started to put together a list of who are our top prospects and how are we going to cultivate them. If you're thinking about a capital campaign, which many of you are, you need to be working on this right now. And
absolutely.
It's not rocket science, but it is work and you need to do it. So
let me talk a little bit about where you find your donor prospects.
Sure.
The first place you look is in your in-house files. Okay, you need to look at your donor database and take a good hard look at maybe lifetime giving, maybe largest gift. I would definitely look at former board members. Very, very important that they are probably going to be some campaign potential there, but you need to rope them back into being involved again. And also, if you've had a capital campaign in the past, the first place I'd look is for my former campaign donors. So your in-house data is key, and that is grounding in reality, right? And listen, I just want to let you know that everybody's database is screwed up, so if yours is screwed up, it's okay. It's okay, because this is the state of nature in many organizations, but you go forward with the information you have. And let me talk about the concept of screening. I do major gift coaching, and I have a group of people, and they're struggling with screening right now, and so let me explain this concept. Screening is when you take a list of potential donors to another person and you ask them to discuss the list with you. Will you please screen the list? Now, you could go to another donor and say, would you please brainstorm with me some names of other potential donors? Okay, or you could go to another donor or to a board member and just have your list in your head so that it's not intimidating, because sometimes if you bring out a prospect list that's all organized, it may feel weird to some people. It's confidential data. So whenever you do have a screening conversation, they need to be a trusted insider pretty much. But board members should be able to help you with this. Other staffers may be able to help. But definitely other donors, people who are interested in fundraising, who've been fundraising a lot in the community, would love to sit there and talk to you about your campaign strategy. Now, you might think that's really weird, but you could go to the biggest philanthropist in your town and say, sir, we're thinking about a $5 million capital campaign or whatever your number is, and I would love to pick your brain about our fundraising strategy. And when you got in the room, you could say, well, your big philanthropist is going to say to you, well, you need a lead gift of 20% of your goal. Who do you have in mind? and the person you're meeting with may say, well, I think they can probably do that, and I think you should ask them. And I'll tell you what, I think so-and-so should really be involved in this ask to approach this prospect. So by having screening sessions, you get enormously wonderful information about your prospects and who they may listen to and what their capacity is, because, and this is key, my personal favorite way to do prospect research is literally through local word of mouth and even the concept of hearsay. And what I mean by that is that your potential big donor, your top 60 donors we're looking at there, they have friends in the community who all know them and travel with them and love them, like them, and they have families, and they're known, and their inclinations are known, their preferences are known. You're not prying in any way, but you are seeking advice, strategic advice about whether a potential donor would really love the Boys and Girls Club and what they're really interested in and how the best way might be to approach them. You want to talk about prospect research, Andrea?
Well, yeah, I've thought a lot about prospect research. I think without doubt the best prospect research is what people are willing to tell you about themselves.
Ooh, yes.
We have so many of these electronic screenings. You can pay for prospect research, right? And I often have people who use various, and it's good to get.
It's expensive.
It's expensive, and you do get some good material. But my main concern about it is that sometimes you learn more than you should know, and that sometimes compromises your relationships. If you start getting curious and asking people about themselves and asking people about their friends and their neighbors and what's going on in their lives and what their philanthropic inclinations are, you'll find that they are happy that you asked them and they're willing to talk to you about it. So I think we often overlook that easiest, most fundamental of prospect research.
And let me give you a question that you might say to a donor to get the donor to tell you about him or herself. You would say, I'd love to know about your philanthropy. Yes. I'd love to know I'd love to know about your personal vision for your own philanthropy. What are you most interested in our community? I understand that you're interested in underprivileged youth in our community, and I'd love to know more about that interest. See, that is the way. I'm sorry, Andrea?
It's amazing how respectful that is, right? You're not asking that question because you want to steal their money. You're asking that question because you want to find out if their interests overlap with what you're doing. And if they don't, you're not going to, then you'll know not to go on. So this is if you deal with it in a respectful way, it's so much fun to identify people and to learn about them. And with, of course, board members and others. Board members can come on these calls with you and can talk to people if you train them and if you help them figure out what they need to do.
Yeah, and I want to give you all one really key tip that I have used in the capital campaigns I have led in the past 10 or 15 years. And a lot of you are in the early planning stages, so look, this is quite frankly, I would say go throw a party to honor your organization's founders and former board members. Create an event and honor them, and you should do this anyway, right? Because these people really are important to the history of your organization, to your stature in the community, and they're probably potential campaign donors, so bringing them in really early with a warm and fuzzy feel-good event way before you start launching your campaign is a smart strategy, and it's also something you probably ought to do anyway. And when you're doing something like this, always get somebody else to pay for it, right? That's another number one rule of cultivation events.
Yeah,
just check the time, Andrea. Shall we? Let's move on, and let's talk about cultivation, because this is the place where I like to live. I like to live in how do we have a donor relationship. Now let me. I got to tell you a story. Yesterday, I was having coffee in Chapel Hill with a good friend of mine, Ellie Jordfall, who's former head of our AFP chapter here. She's been a 30-year fundraiser, and she's head major gift officer or director or whatever at the UNC Lineberger Cancer Center. And she said there's this lady who's rated at $3 million plus, and she gives the Cancer Center $10,000 a year, and nobody's ever been able to see her. And Ellie's called very nicely, but never been able to get an appointment. And so all of a sudden, Ellie was planning to go to Greensboro, North Carolina, where this lady lived, and Ellie calls her again in her most lovely and polite way, and the lady picks up the phone, the donor. And she says, yes, I'm really in a hurry running out the door. And so my friend Ellie's sitting there thinking, how do I keep her on the phone for 5 minutes so that she'll say yes to a meeting? And this is what Ellie said. I'm trying to paraphrase it. She said, oh, Mrs. Smith, I am so honored and thrilled to be able to finally talk to you. You have been a donor to the Lineberger Cancer Center for all these years, and I'm just thrilled to be able to give you some verbal thank you. So it's a lovely way to approach a donor who's been giving you for a while and who has vast potential. And and Ellie, she sounds like she was gushing, but she doesn't gush because she's this Norwegian, very reserved, beautiful mannered lady. But you can approach a donor the way with warmth and friendliness. If they have been investing and supporting your boys and girls all these years, you have a natural way to get in the door. And I also want to mention the concept of advice visits. If you follow my blog, Fired Up Fundraising, I have a Friday newsletter too that goes out, and I talk a lot about advice visits. If you ask your donor for advice, if you ask them their impressions of what you're doing, you will go far, because a cultivation activity for your donors means that your donor is doing the talking. Donor is doing the talking. You do not want to talk more than 50% of the time. So the bigger the big shot you're calling on, the more likely they are really going to insist on doing the talking, or they're going to be sort of insulted. So it's not quite so scary to approach a donor if you approach them for advice and guidance.
Yeah, my dear. So
yes,
first of all, we need to keep our eye on the time a little.
Okay.
But here's what I want to say about these two slides, these last two slides, donor identification and donor cultivation. We have a bunch of you on this call who have said that you are in the early stages of thinking about your campaigns. And you could do much worse than pulling together a small group of people from your board and say, you know what, before we're even very far down the road, why don't we make a list of our 20 most philanthropic people in town who have we know have some interest in the Boys and Girls Club, and start figuring out how you're going to not only identify them, but start to bring them closer and engage them in your organization. That's what's going to set up your campaign for success down the road. Don't wait until you're ready to ask them for money. Use this process to do it now. How's that for being
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
fun.
we could do a whole webinar on this, but I will move on in the interest of time. And, I get to talk about how to identify and recruit a great chair. You know, and in order to do this, I have to go back to my favorite slide, cultivation. Whoops, I can't find my controls. Here we go. I want to speak about the idea of a campaign planning committee, which is a short-term task force of the most important the most important prospects, volunteers, and or board members you can get in a room, and it should not be very large. It shouldn't be maybe more than 10 or 11, okay? And your planning committee would only meet maybe 3 times, and they would hear about your case, the need, and they would understand the project that you're anticipating, and they would then discuss with you your prospects, perhaps the feasibility study. They would give your campaign their blessing. All right. So when you're forming, and by the way, this idea came from Andrea's book, Save My Butt, over and over. And every campaign I've ever done in the past 15, 20 years, I used the campaign planning committee with astonishing success.
Yes,
because you get the most important, influential, wealthy people on board with you really early on. So you want to, first of all, you want to identify some people who might be a great chair and put them on your planning committee. That's so right. That they can get a taste of your campaign, understand it, get to know you, develop some confidence. Then it's much, much, much easier to ask them to be a leader. We are also seeing, I've helped a lot of campaigns that had co-chairs or even tri-chairs, and that works well. I was working with the Botanical Garden in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and we had a social lady who didn't have a professional background. She was a lovely social person, and then we had a well-respected businessman, so they complemented each other very nicely. Andrea, you have any comments on recruiting a great chair?
Well, why don't you go to the next slide?
Yeah, and I want to talk about also, we should talk about what are you looking for in a chair. There we go.
There it is. So what are you looking for in a chair? Well, there are a number of things that I think are really important. Ideally, at least one of your chairs should be an inevitability creator. Someone who, when they are involved in your campaign, the success of your campaign seems inevitable. There are people like that in most communities, that when they're involved, everybody knows it's going to work. They tend to be people who have resources, people who have power, but mainly they're people who get things done and who are willing to work on campaigns because they want to help an organization move to the next level. So just because somebody's not willing to serve on your board doesn't mean they won't be willing to serve on your campaign planning committee. And actually, they may well be willing to serve on your board because they see your campaign as a way for your organization to start to do more work and have more impact on solving the problems of your community. So what are you looking for? You're looking for someone who has stellar credentials in terms of being involved in things, in philanthropic things in your community that work. You're looking for someone, and I'm a bear about this, you're looking for someone who is going to do what they say they're going to do. I can't tell you how impossible it is to have a campaign chair who says yes, 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 and does nothing. It's so difficult. So I don't care how social and how big a name is. If somebody is not going to do what they say they're going to do, you're in trouble if you get them to be your campaign chair. You can have them be an honorary chair, but don't get them to be a chair. Where will you find that person? Well, I would certainly look at who is heading up other campaigns in your community. Whose reputation is really great in your community. It may well be somebody who's already a donor to you. It may be someone who's a lower level donor to you, but who gives larger gifts to other organizations. Right? Start asking around about who, if you ask this question, if you were to think about the ideal chair for our campaign in this community, what name comes to your mind? And what you'll find is that people are going to start giving you the same name, maybe the same 2 or 3 names. Start asking around. It's amazing what happens when people start giving you the same name, and after a while you can go to that person and say, you know what, we've talked to a lot of people in this community, and we asked them who would be the ideal chair, and everyone points to you. So we'd like to ask you if you would serve that role for us as we move our organization ahead. You've tried that, Gail, I know, and I know you've gotten it to work, right?
Well, here's the thing. Go see your chosen chairperson, and they've got to be properly warmed up and involved with you so that it's not a cold visit. And go see them with a delegation of the most important people that they cannot say no to, and you're with them. So this may be a one person in their office, and there are 4 of y'all here who he really respects or she really respects, and then you give them a sheet of paper. And we did this for the Fayetteville Botanical Garden campaign. We said 20 reasons why Harvey Schmidt should be our campaign chair. 20 reasons. We said he's led campaigns before, he's respected in the community, he has connections, we just went on and on and on about all the wonderful things that he could do. And let's see. Here it is. It's why Harvey Wright. You are the most influential member of our committee and a significant leader in our community. Your very presence in this role lends prestige and stature to the program. You have a proven track record. You're success-oriented. You know how to get a job done. You know how to delegate. You're committed to our mission and vision. You're the unanimous selection of our search committee. So yeah, it would be hard to say no to this. It's a beautiful sheet of paper with the logo of the campaign, and it's been presented to this gentleman in his office. Whammo. Do you think he said no? Not at all.
So spending the time and the effort and the energy to not only identify the people who will be your inevitability chairs, as I think about them, but also figuring out who to help identify, who to help cultivate them, who to help recruit them. To get really good chair, it takes time, it takes effort, and you will not go wrong investing your time and effort there.
That's right, because a good chair is sort of like branding for your campaign. They're the seal of approval.
Gail, we got to move on.
Move on, okay? Well, we have 3 more questions, so I think we're doing fine on time.
I know. I don't want to keep anyone longer.
Okay. Well, let's talk about how you fire up your board. Again, this is one of my specialties, and Andrea's talking a bit about this at your conference in New Orleans. Your board is coming into the campaign with a lot of questions, right? And first of all, they may not understand capital campaign methodology. Remember, I made a big point about that earlier. So one of your very important jobs is to make sure they understand the process. And we've got a slide at the end that Andrea's going to show you that really will help you educate them about what we do when, what is our strategy, why do we do it this way. So I would say training them, and I think you have to train them over and over and over. They're not going to get it in one time. And also, if you have somebody who's experienced with campaigns, it's really wonderful to have them on your board. So if you're thinking about a campaign, I would definitely try to get a couple of board members who have some experience if you don't already. And then you want to involve them in the process. Now, they will be thinking, what will be asked of me in this campaign? What is my role? What is my job? So you need to come to them and lay out a proper role for everybody. They do not all have to be asking for money. That's one of the very first things they're thinking. I'm not a big money person. I'm uncomfortable asking. This is not a job for me. And you say, that's just fine. We're going to create a campaign steering committee of people who are going to be doing the asking. But your job as a board member is to be an advocate and to be a supporter and to help us open doors and network our way into this campaign goal. So it's really important for you to clarify their roles, okay? Educate them and clarify their roles. And also, this is key, you want to make really sure all your board members are behind the plan. It's a big project, because I have run into more than one campaign in which the board was divided. And there was a group of people who were afraid of going this far so fast, were afraid of the ability to raise the money, and they undercut the efforts of the campaign. So be really crystal clear that if there are any objections or questions from your board members, you need to get them out on the table early, really early. Andrea?
Yeah, it turns out that the gift range chart that we went over before is a very helpful tool with your board. Often boards think, well, we're never going to be able to raise this money because they can't imagine that they know the money is not going to come from them.
Right.
boards probably are not boards that are brought on because everybody has great wealth. So they can't imagine it. When you show them a gift range chart and you say, we are working to identify the people, you know, some of them are already our donors and we're working to cultivate them, the people who could give the largest gifts, your board members are going to start to feel better about the process.
Yes.
They're going to start
Good point.
to understand. So I think
Good point.
it really works. That's one of the many uses of a gift range card, to make your board understand how this fundraising is going to work.
Yeah.
All right. Your case for support, right? I love this picture because it's sort of the way people tend to view the case for support, like it's the enemy. Right? It's like, do I really have to write this? And I think there is a lot to know. Again, we encourage you, as soon as your campaign objectives and goals are clear, you can begin to write your case for support. You don't have to wait to hire a consultant. You should begin working on writing that document. And there are some very simple questions that the case has to answer. A case for support does not start out as a fancy brochure. They may never, frankly, need a very fancy brochure, but it certainly doesn't start out that way. It starts out as a draft, and one of the reasons you want to be working on it early is because the process of developing it is a way in which you can ask people for advice, and you can pull together an ad hoc committee. You can engage some of your major donors with this process of developing the case. Here are the questions that the case answers. First and foremost among them is why. Why are you doing it? What impact is it going to make in the community? The case is not about your needs. It's not a laundry list of your needs. The case answers this question. If we invest in our organization, what difference is it going to make to our community, to the people we serve, and overall to the health of our community? And if you can answer that, you have the entry point into your case. That's the 30,000-foot view. Then you move down to, all right, this is what your impact is going to be. Now, what are you doing? What are you doing to make that happen? Why is it important that you do that? Why are you and your organization perfectly set up for this project? And why is it important to do it now? How will you go about doing it? What's your plan? How much will it cost? And what's next? There, in a nutshell, are the pieces of your case for support. Starting out at 30,000 feet, then going down to 15,000 feet, then ending up at 3 feet. What's next? How much is it going to cost, and what's next? Gail, you want to add a little?
Yeah, I think that people start out with their case for support, and they write this long-winded treatise on their organization's founding and history. 30 years ago, the Boys and Girls Club was founded by blah, blah, and over the years, blah, blah, this happened, blah, blah. And that's like the natural instinct, but I hate to throw cold water. That's not a good case statement. The case statement has got to be written in marketing language, and it's a marketing document, not an English expository paper. And so right off the bat, wham, you say the Boys and Girls Club has a vision. We have a vision that we're going to be able to reach X number of underprivileged kids so that they have a safe place to come home to school to, and people who really care about them and love them and support them, or whatever you might want to say, but it's all about the future. It's all about this exciting, amazing, wonderful vision that you have for your community, and that's the kind of thing that has energy. And that's the kind of thing that people will fall in behind. You don't want them yawning their way through 3 pages of dense copy where you're honoring everybody who's ever played a role in your organization's history. You put that at the end. So that's the biggest mistake I see organizations making. And I prefer that you start out with an outline and then fill it in from the outline so you're not stuck wordsmithing.
And once you've written the draft of it, if you look at the draft and you started out, you couldn't resist starting out by saying our organization was founded in such and such a time, go back and start again. You do not want to start there. Let me talk for a minute about why the draft is important. We're done. Let's not talk about why the draft is important. We are. You're exactly right, Gail. So,
well, Yeah, here's the problem with the feasibility study. If you rush into it, the people who are being interviewed in the feasibility study are not going to be familiar with your project or your organization enough to really give a thoughtful answer. And so then you may actually be wasting your time having a feasibility study too soon. So you need to do these 4 steps before you engage in a feasibility study. You have to have your plan, and this is really a summary of our whole webinar. But don't leave, because we've got a really important slide that you really can use with your board members. So I'm just going to quickly run this. You need to engage and identify and chat with your top donors before they're ever interviewed by a consultant, and you need to make sure your board is on board. But look, this is the slide I want Andrea to tell you about, because this is really key. It lays out in a graph form the timetable for a campaign. Andrea?
This is a really nifty little slide. You can see, many of you may know that the campaign breaks into a quiet phase and a public phase. You may have some vague notion of what that means. What happens during this quiet phase of the campaign, these whole first 3 boxes, is that you're working with what we call a working goal. You don't have published materials. You are not making press releases saying how much money you're going to raise for what. You're raising the leadership, you're doing your pre-campaign planning, you're planning, and you're talking to your largest donors and the donors who are closest to you. And you're doing it fairly quietly, because you want to really find out how much money you can raise. And you won't know that until you talk to those insiders and lead donors. Once you've talked to them, you'll have a pretty good idea, and it may be more than you thought of how much you could raise. It may be less than you thought. But you don't create your published materials, you don't go to the press, you don't get loud about it until you know. Once you're ready, then you will kick the campaign off, have a published goal, and after that you're going to go to the entire community for the rest of your gifts. This is pretty much the way every campaign lays out, from the biggest campaign at the biggest university to the smallest campaign at a little local organization.
Yeah, and let me just say that this whole edition of the pre-planning, that's what we're talking about with you right now. Planning is when you're engaging your planning committee, you're recruiting your chairs, you are having your feasibility study. So we're talking about the early stages here where you really want to get your ducks in the row and do your own thinking and planning before you engage expensive consultants. And so we do have a special offer for you. Andrea and I really love to do free strategy sessions with organizations who are planning campaigns. We learn a lot. We help you. We help the community, and we keep our fingers in the pie, so to speak. And this is if you want to take advantage of our offer for a 30-minute free coaching session with myself or Andrea, here's the web address, capitalcampaignmasters.com/application. And I want to also share with you that we do pre-campaign telephone coaching. And we have a group that's just starting up in a couple of months. We do groups every year. We cycle 3 groups through every year who are a group of organizations who are laying the groundwork of their campaign early. They're not yet in feasibility study stage. We try to help you go through these questions and be thoughtful and get some really, really, really experienced advice like from Andrea and myself, so that you can don't make any mistakes too early on, and you can lay the dominoes up quickly. Do you have something to say, Andrea? You want to comment on that?
Do I ever not have anything to say, Gail? So if you go to capitalcampaignmasters.com/application, it'll send you to a very brief application. What it does is to give us it gives us an understanding of who you are and what you're doing, just very briefly. And that sets us up for a call. We would then, our gal Stephanie would be in touch with you to schedule a call with one or the other of us. And those calls are really interesting and fun. And if as we talk to you, we find you would be a good candidate for coaching, our coaching program, we would let you know. And if not, that's fine. There are no strings attached. This is really, it is not lining you up for anything particular.
Yeah. And listen, there haven't been that many questions questions, which is sort of interesting. And so if you do have questions, you can shoot us an email. We'd love to help you out. We love the Boys and Girls Club. Y'all have, I just want to tell you, from my opinion, you've got the most amazing case for support, amazing mission, and you should be able to raise the money you need if you're well organized, because the work you do speaks for itself. And in that point, it is 2 minutes after 4 Eastern time, so we're going to let you go. We invite you again to, I'm sorry?
Well, maybe Susan wants to close this out. Are you there, Susan?
Yeah.
I am. I'd like to thank Gail and Andrea so much for presenting our guest webinar today, and to let everyone know that in the handout section of your screen, you'll find a handout from Gail and Andrea with the PowerPoint slides that they discussed today, as well as a gratuitous plug for an upcoming Best Practice Sharing Expo at the National Conference that I hope everyone on here will apply to take part in. I will stay on the line, and Gail and Andrea, if you're able to as well, we may have a few questions, but we will go ahead and conclude so that everyone can get on with their day and start thinking about raising more money for their mission. So thank you both so much for being here, and we will stay on for a moment to see if there are any questions.
Great.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for spending an hour with us. We wish you well in your journey and in your work.